kia ora koutou, kia ora tātou. He karakia tīmatanga. Opening incantation for our day. Ka pai. Hau mai rā e te tīmatanga, e hau nei mātou i nā kaupapa, mā rio mō tēnei wā. Whatu pāpā te kākano toro miro, whakatau mai rā i roto i te āteatana o tēnei rā, ui e haumi e, tā iki e. O thy spirit of beginning cometh forth to assist us to bring fruition to our aims and objectives of importance this day. Instill thy perpetual seed of knowledge into us as we are in a state of learning. Settleth within us our freedom of obstructions this day, embraceth, gathereth, anointeth ye. Ka huri, ka iahoe Otene.
Whakarongo ake au ki te tangi a te manu e re re runga rawa e. Tui, 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 tui a. Tui a i runga, tui a i raro. Tui a i waho, tui a i roto. Tui, tui, tui a. Ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao. Tui, tui, tui a. My attention is drawn to the cry of the bird nearby, to the bush wren calling, bind, join. Be united as one. May it be woven above, enmeshed below, entwined outside and within our very beings. Interlaced by threads of human love, may there be peace at night and peace by day in our lives. Nō reire, ngā mana i ngā reo rauranga tira mā. He paku te kōrero, he paku te mihi kia koutou kua tai i tēnei rangi. Kia koutou ngā waiwai tapu kua uru nei i tēnei rangi. Tēnei te mihi kia koutou nau mai, hara mai, a whakatau mai. Whakarongo ki te tangi o ngā manu kua karanga nei nā kōrero kai wainga nui te ngāhere i tēnei rangi. Nō reira kia koutou hoki, kua hoki mai, anō ki te kai ana ngā miro mai te ngāhere. Nei rā te mihi kia koutou, hare mai, hoki mai ki ngā kōrero. Nō reira, ka mea na mātou nei mātua tūpuna. Nau te raurau, nā kū te raurau, ka ora ai. Te iwi, nō reira, koutou mā, e hakarongo ki tēnei mihi paku. He mihi aroha ki a koutou katoa i roto tēnei rangi. To use, to those of you who have entered into this huia gang today, I welcome you, but especially to those who have arrived here into this conference again, for the first time, I welcome you once, I welcome you twice, I welcome you 3 times. We have a proverbial saying that goes, that I use, with your basket of knowledge and with my basket of knowledge, the people will live. And as you listen to the different speakers throughout the day, hopefully we'll be able to glean something some knowledge that we can pass on and make this place of Aotearoa a better place. Nō reira, ka mihi tonu ki tō tātou nei kingi Māori, kingi Tuheitia. Ka noho ana ia i runga te āhurewa tapu o ngā mātua o ngā tūpuna. Ka mea ana i te kāhui araki a rire hau, pai mārire.
Pai mārire.
Mate ki ngā itu o koutou mā, haere koutou, moi mai rā. Nō reira, i ngā mana, i ngā reo, te iti me te rahi, a tēnei te mihi kia koutou katoa, kua whakarongo nei, ki tēnei rangi, purino, tēnā koutou, a tēnā tata katoa. Tūturu o whiti whakamaua kia tēnā,
Tina.
haumi e hui e,
Tai ki e.
Kia ora koutou e tēnei, e na mana, e na iwi, e na rangatira, no mai, hari mai, whakatū mai, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, everyone, and thank you once again to Richie and Otene for that great mihi and urging us to really take the opportunity to develop our knowledge and learning for the future benefit of New Zealand. Welcome back to Building Nations Day 2. We hope you enjoyed the first day and took a lot away from the speakers that we had yesterday. So today we're going to delve a little bit more into some of the very topical areas within the infrastructure sector and indeed within New Zealand, with local government and water reform being the themes for this morning's sessions. We'll hear from LGNZ Chief Executive Susan Freeman-Greene, and that will be followed by a Q&A session. And then we will hear from Local Government Minister, the Honourable Nanaya Mahuta, followed by a Q&A session with the DIA officials working on Three Waters reform. So I'm expecting there will be quite a lot of questions for both those sessions. Later on, you will have to make a choice between the concurrent sessions on the future of local government post-water reform and resource management system reform, after which we'll hear a little bit about the lessons from Scotland and their water reforms and whether we have any lessons for New Zealand. So before handing over to Rory Bishop to introduce our first speaker, I want to take a minute just to run the poll, so get you thinking first thing in the morning, to run the poll on INZ and members' priorities. So could we please run the poll? Thank you. Is that working at the moment? I can't see anything. Thank you. Interesting, we're still seeing the top three. Oh, we've maybe moved one out from the top three, but addressing the infrastructure deficit and climate change still holding certainly two of the top three positions. Great, thank you. Thank you for everyone who's contributed to that. So it looks as if, as I said, we've got a bit of movement around the top three, but certainly addressing the infrastructure deficit and climate change, still there in the top three. And then probably just looking, we've got a tie in third place, still the attracting talent and retaining skills, but also then coming in now, identifying the infrastructure pipeline and costs. Thank you very much for contributing to that. And as I say, we'll run these polls throughout the rest of the conference. It's my great pleasure now to hand over to Rory Bishop to introduce our first speaker for the day. And Rory is a INZ board member. So Rory, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Margaret, and good morning, everybody. It gives me real pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the second day of Building Nations, Susan Freeman-Greene, who's the Chief Executive of Local Government New Zealand. Susan leads Local Government New Zealand, having previously led Engineering New Zealand for 6 years, where she actually helped transform that organisation into the organisation that we see now, which is an outward-facing modern organisation dedicated to creating better futures for the people that live and work in New Zealand. Susan said that the role at local government really excites her, and Susan, like many of us, I'm sure, believe that local government is at the heart of our communities. And when local government is strong, our communities thrive, and so does the rest of Aotearoa. Before Engineering New Zealand, Susan was also the Chief Executive of the Broadcasting Standards Authority, and Susan also held leadership positions with the Human Rights Commission as Chief Mediator and Strategic Policy Manager. Susan has practiced law and mediation in New Zealand and the UK, and Susan sees both of those things as informing her own leadership styles. And Susan likes to balance hard-edged legal compliance and analytical skills against the softer-edged relationship influencing and advocacy skills. And Susan sees those as two sides of the leadership coin. Susan is also on the board of Vital and Tawhiri, and also Susan is the creative force behind the New Zealand Festival of Arts. So a really broad range of skills to draw on for leading local government New Zealand into the future. And I'm really excited to hear from Susan this morning, and really welcome the opportunity to welcome you, Susan Freeman-Greene. Thank you very much.
Kia ora, Rory. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko te ahu mairangi te moanga, ko te awa kairangi te awa, ko Ngāti Pākehā tuku iwi, no whanganui a tara a hau, ko Susan tuku ingoa, no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings to you all. 5 years ago this week, the Kaikoura earthquake struck. I was in London in a coffee shop about midday when my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Alarm bells rang on every front. First, of course, is everyone safe? And then, as I was leading Engineering New Zealand at the time, the realization of the enormous ramifications for the engineering sector. Crisis created both visible destruction, devastation, and subtle, more insidious damage. But in that crisis, New Zealand pulled together. Central, local government, business, and communities came together to remediate infrastructure, to support people and communities, and protect us from future shocks. In Kaikoura itself, the clear vision of moving mountains to reconnect communities drove incredible collaboration. 5,000 locals and 1,700 workers from multiple agencies and organisations pulled off a rebuild in record time, a testament to what can be achieved when you pull together with purpose. At the outset of the COVID crisis, there was no question about pulling together. The team of 5 million mantra galvanised us all. Central, local government, business, communities, again, pulled together to support and protect our people as one, as we went into lockdown and upended the way we worked. Today, 20 months on, with our focus now on vaccinations, we're still holding it together pretty well, but we are seeing some fraying at the edges. When it counts in a crisis, Kiwis are good at partnership. We collaborate well, we create and trust relationships forged under pressure. We rapidly build new ways of working. Ego, power issues are mostly left at the door, right across central, local government, iwi business, and in communities, as we all work together towards common goals and the common good. But when we're not in an immediate crisis, and we have to look further down the track for the burning platform, even if it's visible, collaborating feels so much harder. We get bogged down, we lose sight of shared objectives, creative ways to meet them. We become positional, we're quick to call out others for their unreasonableness, their lack of understanding, or their bad faith, and we fixate on binary either or options or ultimatums. So today I'm going to talk about change and partnership and those challenges in the context of local government. Local government is at a fork in a road as it faces the juggernaut of reform coming down the pipeline. And how we engage with that is going to be critical to the future for local government. Because local democracy is at stake here. And it's important because a thriving, sustainable, inclusive local democracy driven by intergenerational community interests is going to be critical to meeting all our wicked problems, from Three Waters to the massive infrastructure challenges we have, climate change. These aren't issues that are going to be resolved by one sector or one arm of government. Success won't be easy, nor is it guaranteed. So many factors need to fall into place. Local government must reimagine what local democracy looks like in a future Aotearoa, which will be different to how it was before and how it is today. Central government needs to reflect on what it does best and what is better done by those closest to communities. What can central government let go of? All of us must contemplate the important role that iwi Māori have in the concept of local governance and have iwi Māori front and centre in the conversation. And finally, communities must actively want to participate in decisions about how they live, work, and play. And most importantly, all these conversations have to come together because local government affects us all. It is, in this context, a major deliverer of our infrastructure, but the way it shapes and creates our communities and contributes to our well-being cannot be underestimated. And of course, COVID is not the only crisis on the table right now. In addition to COVID, we have climate change, changing demographics, our creaking infrastructure, social change. For example, growing divisions between urban and rural, older and younger generations, and the good and the bad of the internet, which is playing into the breakdown of what we used to take for granted, the scientific evidence-based consensus. Now, your facts aren't my facts, and while this may be a legacy of a certain US president, it's becoming much more pervasive in the political debate in New Zealand, with a growing tendency to play the person, not the issue. And this has been starkly demonstrated in the COVID context over the past week. We're also seeing it writ large in Three Waters reform. And in this time, this context of massive immediate or future crisis, this government has launched wave after wave of proposals for fundamental change. Not only do these have direct and material implications on local government, they risk swamping us. It's not only the direct reforms around housing, resource management, Three Waters, and the future for local government, but also reforms in health and climate change, which are fundamental to our well-being. As one of our mayors said recently, having completed the LTP process earlier this year, which is usually the peak of their annual cycle, this time I felt there was a higher, far more treacherous mountain standing right ahead of us. He was referring to Three Waters, but it's getting increasingly clear that this is just a part of a significant range to cross rather than a standalone summit. So it's difficult and challenging for the sector, which has many drivers towards conservatism, not least the rates-averse local body electors. And it's also difficult terrain for local government New Zealand to navigate. We're the sector's peak body. We serve our members, both elected members and councils themselves. But our mandate is around the sector's national interests. What's in the sector's national interests and the good of communities together? And our constitution is clear on this, but there's a conflict with councillors naturally focused on the local and local government. Three Waters has itself become a lightning rod for reacting to change. And LGNZ and our mandate's been at the heart of that. Previously, we lived and breathed primarily as an oppositional group. We stood against things, less for things. This got us attention, but gave us little constructive influence. We weren't seen as credible enough for central government to invite into the front end of their policy development processes. But we've recognised a lot harder to change policy once it gets to the select committee stage and legislation is drafted. So early last year, our National Council made a strategic shift. We decided we needed to engage much more constructively in three waters in the face of a government with an outright parliamentary majority determined to carry out water reform. So this was before I started. Our National Council joined a central government, local government steering group. In July this year, we announced a heads of agreement with the government. This secured $2.5 billion for the sector, but more critically, secured commitments about working through all the reforms ahead in partnership. The strategic approach is based both on the volume of change coming and a strong view that local government will have more influence if we're at the table facing into issues and working on solutions that hold local democracy to the forefront, not just for Three Waters, but for all the reforms that are coming. Into that mix, the government's decided to mandate Three Waters reform, and you will have all seen and heard the sector's justified anger about the government's face decision not to mandate, or to mandate. And to be clear, LGNZ never supported this reform being mandated. What we did was create leverage for the sector in the event that it was. As to the reforms themselves, almost all the sector agrees there needs to be some change. 75% of the sector oppose the reform in its current form. Those last four words are critical: in its current form. The 75% figure is sometimes misconstrued to give the impression that 3/4 of the councils are opposed to water reform. That's not the case. There's deep acknowledgement of the case for change. The 8-week consultation feedback period amplified and crystallised the sector's major concerns with the settings of the current model: governance and representation arrangements, local voice, integration with the planning system, and rural water schemes. These critical issues are still on the table, and we are at the table. Leveraging the heads of agreement, we've ensured there are mechanisms in place to get the changes the sector needs. Last week saw the announcement of a robust working group to take forward this work around governance, representation, accountability, and local voice. And it's also fair to say that the sector is broadly aligned on the wider view that we will get more traction by staying in the tent. But Three Waters is just the start. Resource management reform is also heating up, and potentially even more significant and more complex. And the exposure draft report from the Environment Select Committee suggests that in its current form, the reforms will pose challenges for local democracy and placemaking as it strives for planning efficiency. Thanks to our heads of agreement with the Crown, we've started to work more closely with the government on this reform, with a joint steering committee recently established. And just last Friday, Environment Minister David Parker fronted up to one of our regular Zooms of over 100 mayors and chairs and CEs, outlining where resource management reform is, and also noting his commitment to working with us to find that sweet spot where we can cut through planning red tape while still enabling communities to have a real say in how their places grow and get shaped. But the biggest prize, and arguably the most challenging reform on the agenda, is the future for local government. Where do we want to be in 30 years? I'm happy to put my cards on the table for this one. I believe that our responsibility to local democracy means a range of things: giving people visibility, creating places where they can express what it is to be human, being better partners, seeing each other's dreams and aspirations, courageous conversations about what's intrinsic, what we need to keep hold of, and what it is time to let go of. These are the things that are at the heart of communities. And in my ideal future for local government, we have a living, breathing, thriving local democracy, one that reflects our modern, progressive, unique nation and our responsibilities to Te Tiriti, where central government, local government and iwi Māori are partners in the future. A local government that represents how we look now in Aotearoa and how we will look in 30, 50, 100 years. Where local government is valued and where our communities are engaged. A future where more than 41% vote in our elections and where our talented future leaders want to stand for public office and our communities want to and can add their voice to the public discourse. And a future where the headlines about local government aren't dominated by stories about conflict and infighting around the council table, but the value it adds every single day. But I don't underestimate the challenge. And a big part of that challenge will come down to the speed the sector faces into the reality of change to take up the opportunity to, with others, seriously redesign the future. Because the Future for Local Government review, which the Minister has underway, is an exciting opportunity, not just for local government. There are things that central government does that may be best suited for local government and vice versa. Across housing, health, social services and other areas, there are a range of things that councils would be well aligned to work in. So this reform is an opportunity for a once in a generation reset. However, at some point in the near future, the reviews period of happy potential will morph into some change proposals, and the conversation will potentially become much more difficult. The sector pushed hard for this conversation, but that isn't the same thing as welcoming the disruption. And a further caution, while system reform is needed, it isn't going to be a silver bullet. People are at the heart of the system, the consumers, the deliverers, the regulators. And when people and communities, what they think and feel and how they get their voice into the system is important. Reform can't just be top down. We need the community voice. Local input can influence all other pieces of work. We believe in strong local democracy, where people have the ability to shape their local communities. Strengthening that ability, providing the right level of resourcing and having the right policies on the ground and on the ground skills to deliver, integral for all our success. And no one part of this will be enough. Local government strength is the connection to the communities, and this will remain critical as we negotiate the reforms. We need to think about the whole system of government, local and central, as well as with iwi, as we create our settings for the future, not just in what we do, but how we work together differently. We're clear at LGNZ that our purpose is to be local democracy's vision and voice, to ensure that local democracy is at the front and centre of all our discussions and all our work. And our vision is to have the most active and inclusive local democracy in the world. And this forces us to imagine a new reality for local government, one that gets its power, momentum and richness and influence from the participation of its communities. My hope is that the sector, local government sector, and the country, which includes everyone in this room, can stay with this conversation in a meaningful way and contribute to it. But I'm under no illusions that doing so may be uncomfortable. Our partnership commitment in the Heads of Agreement holds a commitment between central government and local government to walk, invites to walk, if we can, together to the future for local government. And it's easier said than done. There has been a lack of trust, a history of lack of trust both ways, and it's really easy to be cynical. It's hard to make the leap of faith to engage in the spirit of trust in an environment where one's experience has been something entirely different for some for many years. But I do really believe that the only way through some of the outrage, frustration, confusion and cynicism is engagement. And the only way to capitalize on the hope and the curiosity and opportunity is engagement. I want to end with a few lines from a young Māori leader talking about the future for local government. He said, fundamental transformational change comes when we stand side by side and work together and build a bridge in a safe and dignified way, and where, under intense pressure, we can say we're not alone, we're together. In this context, he wasn't talking about central and local government, he was talking about our relationships under Te Reti. In an immediate crisis, we understand that partnership and collaboration doesn't mean agreement. It means robust debate, in good faith, sometimes behind closed doors, at pace, on the best ways to achieve shared objectives of serving communities. It means facing into challenge, staying in the room, not walking away. It means accepting mistakes will be made on both sides, on every side, but we need to keep working together to make progress. That the crisis or the objectives or the purpose need to pull us together for the greater good. Let's hold this approach through the wicked problems and opportunities we're all facing today. Kia ora. Thank you.
Susan, thank you very much. That was really fantastic and a great oversight, I think, of many of the issues that local government across New Zealand faces. And I guess you've triggered lots of thoughts in my mind and lots of questions for myself, and there are some coming in also now from people out there at the conference. I'll start with a couple of those. So you mentioned only 41% vote in local elections. What do you think needs to be done to increase engagement and voting by local communities? And I would just add to that as well, you know, what are some of the things that you talked about, trusting government and government organisations? What are some of the things that you think can be done to help build that?
It's a huge challenge, isn't it? I mean, one of the challenges for local government, and in fact, this was a topic that was quite relevant, I thought, in my engineering New Zealand days, is that local government is taken for granted often until things go wrong. I mean, local government impacts us on an everyday basis in ways we don't even think about. And so amplifying and demonstrating the value of local government is one key way to do that. Ensuring that communities actually understand how they can have such great input into the way they work, into where they work, live and play, is also important. So understanding the power of local government, the impact of local government is really important. So we're thinking at LGNZ, what shifts need to happen to enable that, because we do think that if, you know, that's the ultimate metric. If we can increase the participation of our communities in local government and have them see its value, it would be incredibly powerful. Another lever, of course, is to have local government better reflect our demographics. Because at the moment, while demographic change is coming amongst our councils, and you can start to see that being reflected in our councils, it's still there's room to continue to have, you know, younger people, more Māori, more Pacifica in our local government sector, and thinking about that as we go forward is going to be key.
Thanks. I think one of the things that probably water reform has done is really brought local government to everyone's attention. You know, so for all of the various debate around it, it certainly has brought local government right into the limelight. One of the other questions that we've just had here is, you talked about the shift of services potentially from central government to local government. Do you have any thoughts around the kind of things that local government might be able to take on in the future and actually draw into their scope?
Well, we have an incredibly open mind on this, but if you think about, and as we hope everyone does, but if you think about the fact that local government is absolutely directly involved in the well-being of its communities, which actually is central government and local government's key objectives. Local government is really proximate to its communities. So we have a fantastic program, for example, which is the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs, where it's a really good example of a partnership between central and local government that is getting young people into jobs all around the motu. And in some of those social areas, public health, well-being, some of the social areas, there are all sorts of ways that we could work better together to shift the dial on that. Some of the social innovation, the partnerships, some incredible opportunities if we just look at it laterally and differently. But we'd be really interested to hear from you. We're just in that process of brainstorming with the Future for Local Government panel is doing. So there are lots of really incredible initiatives, incredible partnerships already that are taking place in different parts of our council world, with partnerships with iwi, partnerships with central government that could be leveraged hugely for the future.
One of the other ones, and this this might draw perhaps on your some of your experience around advocacy. So one of the questions is, you talk about the ability to collaborate, but also to be able to, I guess, stand up also and push back when necessary. And the question is, how does LGNZ plan to balance those two things? And the question is actually, how far inside the tent is too far? And are the heads of agreement between local government and government, are they fit for purpose? So I just checked the question here, and is that able to be renegotiated and really test direction with government?
Well, I mean, the heads of agreement is in essence a commitment to actually work on the really difficult issues. And water reform, for example, and all of the reforms, these are complex problems. There is no one right answer. And they aren't going to be resolved by either local government or central government. You actually, they're iterative problems that need serious work on the parts of them that are not making sense. And so we've been so clear that the problems in the current reform model relate to issues, if you like, around local democracy, around local voice, democratic accountability, the link representation, sort of the link between the multiple layers between governance and the entities and the councils. All of those issues need to be resolved for this to be a model that's workable for everyone and the best model it can be. So, we are really pleased that the next step in the process is a really robust working group that has an independent chair and nine mayors with very different views and 9 iwi representatives around the table to actually, put the ideas you put all the ideas on the table and have a look at how to strengthen the governance, accountability and representation model to see where we get to. And in terms of winners being in the tent too much or not, I mean, that's a really binary way of looking at it. In my view, you have to have multiple tools in an advocacy world. And, you have to engage, but you don't have to agree. And so, being able to, if you're in the tent, you can actually push back harder, in my view, and get listened to and paid attention to more.
Thanks very much. Just looking at some of the other questions that we've got here. So again, changing gears a little bit for you, Susan, but talking about the planning role that council has and the fact that every 3 years councils across the country prepare their LTPs. That takes time, resource, and attracts a large number of submissions and feedback. There's a question here: should the time frame for those LTPs be shifted, or should LTPs be staggered so that they're not all happening concurrently across the country?
Well, I think rather than answer that question head on, which is a kind of operational way of looking at it, I think what is important is that planning happens in the context of what else is going on, and that one of the key issues in the water reform, for example, and it's also really critical in the resource management reform, is the water reform is how does the water reform integrate with the planning system? Because you can't, developing infrastructure in whatever form or way needs to link to councils and communities' plans for how they operate. So having local voice integrated into the planning system, however you operationalize it, is absolutely critical and fundamental to how communities and councils and local government gets to have a genuine impact in placemaking, which is one of the core functions of local government, and actually completely is intrinsic to the flavour of the places we live.
Thank you very much, Susan. Just one quick comment. One of the questions here talks about, at the moment, there's very much a view that lots of things are being centralised and that local government is actually losing ground. What's your opinion about centralisation of local services and centralisation of that decision making?
Well, I think we have to play to our strengths. So, one of the LGNZ's very strong agendas is around localism or local democracy, right? And I reflect on what our former president said when he launched our localism work, and he said that localism involves, actually, as much as anything, playing to our strengths. What should central government do? What should local government do? And I think that's at the heart of the issue. Local democracy, as I've expressed, and having community participation, which is what local democracy is all about, and the way we work is utterly, and what we do and how we live and how we play and where we live is absolutely critical. So, it's an iterative process. So the structures around it are one thing, but the ability and the need for the ability for local communities to have their voice and to actually use their voice is so important. So that's what we have to hold on to. That's what we have to fight for in everything we do.
Thanks very much, Susan. Thank you for the wonderful insight. Thanks for addressing the questions as openly and clearly and honestly as you could. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much for your time this morning on behalf of all of us at Infrastructure New Zealand and Building Nations. So it just remains for me to say again, thank you very much, and to announce our next session, which is the ministerial address with the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta. So thank you very much.